Hey, everybody, it's the Line Podcast, recorded June 28th, 2024, the St. Paul's by-election, and all the chaotic fallout that flowed out of that. Cabinet ministers behaving badly. Chrystia Freeland and Harjit Sajjan, we're going to tell you what they've been up to. And my column this week, are people bailing in baby step increments on this country? All that and more on the latest episode of the Line Podcast. This episode of the Line Podcast has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Canada can be a global leader in reducing the harm caused by smoking, but it requires actionable steps, including giving adult smokers the information they need to choose potentially less harmful alternatives. Learn more at unsmoke.ca. Well, everybody, great to have you here. Before we throw ourselves into the meat of the podcast, we want to just do a couple of housekeeping items. We're not going to do a written dispatch this week. We're going to take the long weekend. We will continue to publish next week at a bit of a slower publication schedule. But Jen, before we get into it, you wanted to send out a special thank you to our subscribers, our advertisers, and our donors.
Yes, and the reason why is because I've taken some of that money and I've invested it into higher quality lights and camera equipment. I really felt that rather than getting like the slightly Vaseline smear version of Jen Gerson, you needed the full middle-aged woman glory. So now you can see all of my wrinkles and my unkempt hair because, of course, we still don't have full water in Calgary right now. We still have to try and restrict our water usage as we try and finish that whole disaster. So I haven't washed my hair. So I'm a disaster right now. It's great. It's fantastic. It's very authentic.
I've got a buddy in Calgary whose golf course is a little bit outside the city and has its own independent water system. Mm-hmm. And he's been showering at the golf club because it has like change rooms.
Although if it's potable water, it's still city water.
No, I think they have a well, I think is what it is, because it's rural.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Anyway, been fun.
Well, let me just add, while we're thanking our advertisers, donors, and subscribers, as alluded to, Jen, we won't get into a lot of detail about this, but I have been navigating a family situation this week, and it's going to mean I'm actually going to be at a alternate command post for a while a relative of mine recovers from a medical issue. And viewers and listeners may notice I'm in a different location going forward. And again, thank you to the people who support the Line Podcast, because I had to go kind of without a lot of notice. I had to go out and buy new equipment. And knowing that we have growing readership and listenership and viewership, and the support of great readers and listeners and viewers and advertising partners made it possible for us to do this. So an expression of gratitude from us here at the Line.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would like to say is that I have made the argument that you should stock up that bunker with canned food and maybe some ammunition and some water buckets, not only because I think that the visual and the branding is very appropriate for this podcast, but also because we all know that canned food and water buckets are great sound insulators. So you could very much improve the actual audio quality of the podcast.
Anyone who's confused by what Jen just said, wait a week, you'll see.
You'll see.
So we'll leave it at that. Well, let's talk about waiting a week or maybe waiting a few more days, because on Monday, was it Monday? Yeah, it was Monday. There was the by-election in St. Paul's, and that was also the night of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. So
which we don't want to talk about anymore.
We don't, not in any particular length. I had the game on the TV, and I had my laptop open on the couch next to me looking at results come in, and the Oilers did not look good, but the Liberal campaign in St. Paul's looked good. I remember when I did watch the Stanley Cup be awarded, boo, hiss, and I saw the Conn Smythe get announced but not collected because McDavid did not come out for it. And that was around the time I shut my screen and went to bed. And at that time, it was a fairly clear Liberal lead. And I woke up the next morning and my text messages and instant messenger apps were all ha, 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 LOL, LOL, LOL. And I thought to myself, are people laughing about the cup? Like, I didn't get it. Like, are people mocking me for having been rooting for the Oilers? But no, people were mocking me because in the midnight hours, or I think in the early morning hours, as those last polls came in, the Conservative candidate, the Conservative challenger in this safe mid to Toronto Liberal riding, Midtown Toronto Liberal riding, the Conservative challenger overtook Leslie Church, who was the Liberal candidate, and ended up winning with about 1.5%, 2% of the vote. Like, any Conservative win in St. Paul's is big. 1% to 2% is comfortable for a Conservative.
We need to explain a little bit about why this is important, because, of course, by-elections happened all the time, and normally we completely ignore them. St. Paul's, how should I say this, has been a safe Conservative riding since 1993. And to put St. Paul's into perspective, it's sort of like a Midtown Toronto riding where I'm pretty sure everybody still wears masks. Like, it's one of those kinds of places. You know what I'm saying? So not only was this supposedly one of the safest Liberal seats in the country, but also both parties had invested quite a lot of symbolic importance into that particular riding and into that by-election prior to the vote, which, of course, the timing of that, the Liberals controlled entirely. So, like, we were hearing rumors from inside the Liberal caucus from people saying, if we lose St. Paul's, it's going to be a coup. We're going to be kicking Justin Trudeau out, because that's, if we lose St. Paul's, we're all potentially toast. We're all vulnerable, right? Correctly. So, one by-election is one by-election, but so much had been in political capital had been invested in that by-election that if the Conservatives actually won it, we knew that was going to lead to a lot of internal drama for the Liberals themselves. And in that internal drama is basically what we are seeing, feeling, and sensing in the last week. Really, it does feel like the Liberal caucus is running around like chickens with their heads cut off, not knowing what to do or how to respond. And to give you an example of that, I will point to a piece that actually just came out as we were recording this podcast. Justin Ling, for a long-time friend of the line, know him for many, many years. Don't agree with him like most of the time, but I like him a lot. But anyway, so he just published this piece that came out in the Toronto Star, and I recommend you check it out. Justin Ling apparently happened to be taking the Vio train home from Toronto yesterday on Thursday. Goes into the Via Rail business class lounge at Union Station, and who does he happen to run into? He happens to run into Mr. Stephen Guilbeault, a Liberal cabinet minister. And what's Stephen Guilbeault doing loudly in public on his phone? Apparently, he's calling all of these Toronto MPs to try and put out fires, to try and calm them down and see if any of them were going to be a potential coup risk for the prime minister and the prime minister's office. So Justin Trudeau's like taking notes, because if you're a cabinet minister and you're talking loudly on your phone in public, hate to break it to you guys, that's fair game journalistically. If you honestly lack the situational awareness or operational security to be engaging in that kind of conduct, I don't have much sympathy for you. But anyway, that ridiculous idiocy aside, apparently Guilbeault's on the phone just dropping secrets about who in the Toronto MP caucus is ready to flip and who's pissed off. And Justin Ling, who's a good reporter, starts following this up, starts making phone calls, and comes up with a great piece about it. The fact that this happened in the first place in and of itself should be concerning. But I mean, I read Ling's piece less as there's a coup afoot and Justin Trudeau is on the way out. And what I actually read it as was a lot of backbench MPs are seeing the loss in St. Paul's as an opportunity to gain cabinet seats or gain leverage. So what they're going to try and push for probably is some kind of cabinet shuffle that will give them at least a couple of months in a position of power before essentially they get shunted from orbit. So I don't read this as like, hey, a Liberal coup is imminent. And I think I want to get into a few more details of why I think there's a very good chance that a Liberal coup is not imminent. But it sure is entertaining.
You know, it's funny. We were talking before we recorded this, things to talk about, things not to talk about. One of the things I mentioned, I don't need to belabor this, but I think part of what the Liberals are going through right now is not just that they lost a safe seat, and not just that this validates in a general sense the polling we've seen. And if the Liberals can lose St. Paul, they can lose anything. Mm-hmm. And if you are a Liberal candidate, especially in the GTA, that won your riding by less than 20 points, you're starting to think the weird thoughts. You're starting to go, maybe it's not so great. But I also think, and I want to talk more about that later, I want to talk about the psychology of that, but I also think they lost in the most brutal way possible. Because we were joking before we started recording that you're more of a chaos agent than I am. You
Yes.
love chaos.
I love
like
drama.
Waking up in the morning and seeing the church had gone from like a lead to a loss delights you. Not in a
great.
partisan way.
No.
You're here for the chaos.
I'm here for the chaos.
I woke up in the morning, and maybe this is just a personality difference between us. I thought to myself, if I want to lose, I want to lose decisively. I want someone to just stick a knife in and I'm done. Or a quick just shot the back of the head. I don't want to lose with every incremental poll update through an entire night. And I think, and I mentioned before, I want to talk about kind of the psychology of this all. The way they lost is ugly and painful. And just to church, the Liberal candidate, that sucks. I'm sorry. Like, it would have been easier on everyone, I think, if the early returns, it'd be like, the Conservatives are going to narrowly eke this one out. She got strung along, and then the guillotine came down like something out of a Tom and Jerry cartoon. And I'm thinking about this. A lot of the Liberals I talk to, they would disagree with you and I on matters of politics, but they would share our assessment of the Liberal situation. And I think there is some of them that are still in denial. I also think there's a broader part of what I'll call the liberal movement in this country that is in denial. And I think those people had a shitty Tuesday morning because you can't rationalize St. Paul's. And St. Paul's suggests, like I said, at least in the aggregate, that the polls are right. And that if the Liberals can lose St. Paul's by 2%, that probably tells us that that vote efficiency that they've been relying on in recent elections is gone. And dozens of seats, according to some of the projections, over 100 seats that they won last time with maybe 3%, they're going to lose this time by 10%. And I think you and I have spoken about this before. Denial can help you cope with the moment, but it can make the eventual reckoning much harder. And I think there are Liberals this week for the first time, again, probably not ones on the inside, but I think some of the ones on the outside who are starting to go, oh my God, we actually are going to lose. I have a small Twitter list of like representative true and non-Liberals.
Yeah, but that's not the reckoning I'm looking for. It's not the reckoning of, oh, we're going to lose the next election. The reckoning that actually they need to be coming to terms with is our party is facing an existential blowout here.
Yeah.
This could actually be the end of the entire brand. That's the reckoning that these guys aren't actually yet coming to terms with. And I think even the people who would agree with us generally about the short-term prospects, I don't think they can conceptualize that yet. So here's the thing that I think that people need to understand right now, because right now everybody's like, well, is Trudeau going to stay? Is Trudeau going to go? Is Trudeau going to stay? That's the question of the week. Why is it the question this week? Well, a couple things. One is that if you are going to dump your leader or have your leader eject himself, appoint an interim leader, do a leadership race, a real and significant leadership race, and establish that person ahead of the next election, even if you are stretching out that next election as long as possible, you are very rapidly running out of runway. Like realistically, you probably needed to do that by June. You needed to do that June. It was generally the talk I was talking to. We've been hearing lately a lot of chatter about Canada Day. It'll be the long weekend. It'll be early July. If we don't see people can always do crazy things. People can go crazy. People can panic. So I'm not predicting the future here. But generally speaking, if Trudeau is going to go, he's got to go in the next week. I think that if he's still prime minister sort of July 10th and probably July 4th, the Liberals are locked and loaded on Trudeau. There's nowhere else to go there. And that's because logistically speaking, I think everything that the Liberals would need to do to run a credible race just disappear in that time frame.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all true. But I think I was talking with my daughter last night, and people won't believe this anecdote, but my daughter for some reason, Titanic has taken over her social media algorithm. She's almost 12. And she was asking me, why does the captain go down with the ship? And in my daughter's view, going down with the ship is just a stupid thing. She's a very literal thinker, my daughter, and she's like, oh, I don't want to drown. I wouldn't go down with the ship. That's stupid. I was trying to explain to her concepts of duty, honor, sacrifice, and my daughter's having none of it. I think Trudeau has to go down with the ship. And I understand that the party wants him gone, parts of it anyway. I understand that he's probably fed up with this bullshit and would love to spend some time on a beach at some billionaire friend's place that he can no longer be found to have violated ethics by visiting. But I think the Liberals as a party need to start thinking about the day after the next election. And I think if they absorb a lesson from St. Paul's, and I'm offering this as a nickel's worth of free advice, don't think about the next 18 months and how you're going to win the next election, because I don't think you can. I think start thinking about what is the way you want to lose the next election. And Liberal partisans will think I'm trying to like Jedi mind trick them here, but I'm being very serious, because there are ways that they can lose that preserves the party as an institution, preserves the party's brand, preserves its fundraising capability. They might still have 100 MPs in different parts of the country, have regional representation, have a good backbench strength to begin reconstituting a party. Or you can get Kathleen Wynne. You can get Brian Mulroney. You can get blown out. Or Kim Campbell, I guess. You can get blown out.
And actually have to really seriously ask yourselves what's your existential reason for existing at this point.
And I think Justin Trudeau probably can't win the next election, but I think he can help control how they might lose it.
Well, if he eats the next election loss and takes that election loss with him, you can actually clean house. You can start with the party with a clean slate. However, look, I've always been kind of long on Trudeau's not going anywhere. And I'd like to say that I'm actually been a minority pundit on that particular point. It seems like every other pundit has been looking at the polls just saying like, these are so bad, these are so sustainably bad that there's no way he could possibly stay on. There's no way he could possibly stay on. There's no way he could possibly. And that's gone on for like, what, 18 months now? He's staying on.
Closer to a year, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like I said, the general consensus, and I think this is correct, is that there's a week left and probably less than a week left before you're stuck with him. You got to double down on the leader and go forward. And the more I see Liberals go out in public and say things like, we heard you in St. Paul's, like, we're going to try harder. The more I hear that kind of stuff, the more I'm like, yeah.
They don't get it.
Either they don't get it or they do get it and they understand that Trudeau's the ticket. So they're just going to stand by him as he goes down. And that's the decision that they're internally making. I think that the reason, now again, I could wind up eating these words in a week, and if I do, you can laugh at me. But the reason why I don't think Trudeau's going to go down in the next week is because if he were going to go down in the next week, he would have gone down in the last year. Right now, the people who need to make these calls are now making calls between the best options between low probability plays, and each low probability play's got issues. So I think Trudeau's decision to stay on is going to come down to three issues. One is ego, second is weakness, and the third is uncertainty. One, I've always said and always thought that Trudeau simply did not have the ego maturity to walk away from a fight with a guy he doesn't like. Mm-hmm. He viscerally hates Pierre Poilievre. You see it in these men's body language around each other all the time. They don't like each other. And to be able to step down from a fight from somebody you really don't like and who you want to fight with, that requires a degree of control and ego maturity that I don't think Trudeau personally possesses. Secondly, weakness. If the party internally, if its caucus or the party apparatus were strong enough internally to be able to put its own survival and best interest at the forefront, they would have ejected Trudeau already.
Yep.
They can't do it. They don't. The party has been radically centralized in the Prime Minister's office. It's become a cult of personality. I don't think that there's enough grassroots party apparatus left to act as a counterbalance ballast against the Prime Minister's office. And I think you've got a caucus that is demonstrably weak.
You know, I'm going to make a classical reference here. You might not get the exact terminology, but I think you'll get it in context. Liberal caucus, they talk and they talk, but they have no garumba.
I 100% do not understand the reference, but I do understand the context, so I'll take it.
Yeah. I bet you watch the YouTube comments. Someone's going to figure that out really quickly.
The last thing, and the reason why I think that he's probably in there is the question of uncertainty. And like I said, if you're a Liberal caucus member and you're sort of trying to make a decision about whether or not to support Trudeau or not, essentially, okay, so you have to start asking yourself, A, who's going to replace him? Can that person can that person save me? Is it going to be Carney? Is it going to be Anand? Is it going to be whoever? So at this point, you have to start to conclude that these are all low probability plays for you. And then you have to also add the possibility of the Liberal Party totally changed its entire leadership procedures back in 2012 when it elected Justin Trudeau. They basically created like a one member, one vote online voting system where anybody who signed up could become a member of the Liberal Party and then vote en masse for Justin Trudeau. And if, again, I'm pulling this number from the top of my head, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he got like more than 100,000 votes in that election campaign. And then those members, I think, subsequently disappeared because there was no cost or consequences for being a member or not being a member. But if those are the leadership rules going into the next leadership race, you have to open up yourself to the possibility that it could be anybody. It might not be Carney. If those are the rules going in, it could be some like really radical, for example, pro-Gaza candidate who wants Sarah Jama for Liberal leader, somebody who can really mobilize popular passions in order to stick just about anyone in there. And I don't know the internals of how they would structure their leadership rules enough to be able to know whether or not they can change their leadership rules from 2012 at this point. But man, that could be an absolute chaos agent you're throwing into this thing. So like, who knows who's in charge of your leadership rules committee right now? Who's in charge of how many changes can you make to your leadership rules? Like there's a lot of technical uncertainty there. And that I think is probably going to be the thing that prevents any kind of Liberal caucus from pulling the final ripcord. That's my suspicion. Now, watch me eat my words next week when Justin Trudeau steps down on Canada Day.
Are you ready for another pop culture classical reference?
Go for it.
Do you remember what happened when the Spice Girls had their reunion tour?
No.
The Spice Girls, and this is one of my favorite internet anecdotes. This is before the internet went all the way bad. This would have been in the mid-2000s. Mm-hmm. And the Spice Girls announced a world tour with a bunch of stops. But they also said they were going to take votes from their fans to select an additional city that they would deem Spice City, and the Spice Girls would go to that city and put on a show for the fans. And it was a chance, hey, show us which city loves the Spice Girls the most. And the voting was wide open to people on the internet, and the internet came together, and I think this was in 2005 or so, and by overwhelming margins, the Spice Girls found themselves having designated Baghdad as Spice City.
Which is hilarious.
This was edited, and Spice City actually ended up being Toronto. So I took my then girlfriend, now wife, to a concert to see the Spice Girls. Spice City was Baghdad. Who will the next Liberal leader be if they don't have...
They don't have controls. Yeah, exactly. Controls in place. Yeah. And what are the major issues that are going to be dictating the next leadership races? Are they going to be issues that are going to be centered on where 90% of Canadians actually are, or are they going to be issues that are able to motivate a very small, passionate base, right? Like, is it going to be electoral reform in Gaza? Well, okay, great. But just so that we're clear, those issues are not going to be election issues for the vast majority of Canadians. So I think the actual questions around how a leadership race would run are significant and would probably be an issue for them. But that's just my opinion. And as I said, I've been wrong before. So I open myself to having to eat my hat with a crow in it. Like that's cool. But anyway, on that note, I think that we should put a pin in that and encourage our listeners and watchers to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
This episode of The Line Podcast has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and regulations, today, nearly 5 million Canadian adults smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. Right now, accessing information about these options is heavily restricted in Canada. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco and vaping products provide a potentially less harmful choice than cigarettes. Cigarettes burn tobacco, resulting in smoke that contains 6,000 harmful chemicals that are associated with smoking-related disease and death. Heated tobacco and vaping products have the potential to significantly reduce this risk. Health agencies around the world are now considering these alternatives to help end smoking. Updated laws can help adult smokers better understand the full range of options available, including the relative risks of these products. Millions of Canadians smoke cigarettes. Technology exists that can help change that, but policymakers need to take actions. Learn more about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at unsmoke.ca. Well, we talked about Chrystia Freeland, cabinet ministers behaving badly. Let's talk about Harjit Sajjan, former Minister of National Defense, and I think now International Development, I think. He kind of fell off my radar the moment he wasn't defense minister anymore. Bob Fife and Stephen Chase in the Globe, they've done it again.
God bless him. God bless him for doing the work that you and I won't or can't.
Story in the Globe this week, an A1 story above the fold, maximum visibility and exposure. Apparently, according to the story in the Globe, and I'm inserting all the caveats around that, according to the story in the Globe, the former Minister of National Defense, and I did check the timeline, Sajjan was indeed defense minister at the time. At the time of the Afghan collapse, when we and our allies were scrambling to get people out, either Canadians or people to whom Canada owed some kind of debt, translators, fixers, things like that. Apparently...
And who were specifically at risk because of the work that they had done with the Canadian Armed Forces. That's a really, really crucial point. Like, we had a real debt of honor to these people.
Perfect way of putting it.
That's right.
Apparently, while that operation was ongoing, the then Defense Minister, Minister Sajjan, had asked or suggested that the military also pick up some Afghan Sikhs. And I note this as neutrally as possible. It is relevant to the story that Minister Sajjan is himself Sikh, I believe, and has been considered to be an effective ambassador and fundraiser among the Sikh Canadians. The implication of the Globe story is that Minister Sajjan put the needs of his co-religionists ahead of the needs of the people to whom Canada had a debt of honor. And you and I can't speak to that. But we can say it's a bad look. And Minister Sajjan this week has denied this. He says he issued no orders. He made a request. He had asked that the military do this if possible. And you and I spoke before we started the podcast. If we had troops on the ground and if we had space on planes, by all means, grab everyone we could. Help our allies. Help out local people who are vulnerable. I get it. If there was the ability to do even more good with the resources we had while they were there, thumbs up, let's do it. The Globe story suggests that the minister's request, apparently he stresses not an order, was disruptive to the overall Canadian military evacuation effort, that it shifted focus and priorities. And again, the minister denies this. Jen, I'm going to leave it with it's a bad look. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, I would actually go much further than saying that it's a bad look. I don't think that that is nearly strong enough. I mean, we at The Line actually came into our own, I think, as an organization, in part because we published some pieces by a reporter or journalist named Kevin Newman, who was really strongly advocating for getting some of the translators and people who had worked previously with Canadian military and journalists on the ground in Afghanistan out, and was able to report through those sources firsthand just what an utter clusterfuck that was. Canada did not cover itself in glory in terms of how it managed that evacuation. And granted, it was a complicated situation. But like, these people, if I recall correctly, were told, for example, to show up to like a gas station outside of the Kabul airport, and then were just left there for hours with no update on what was going on or how they were going to get out. And then like their escape plans disappeared and dissipated. I think we actually had to wind up relying on foreign forces. I believe Mark McKinnon for the Globe did something, if I recall correctly, again, top of my head. It was the Ukrainian military at the time who got many of our people out in that situation, because our own military and our own internal coordination was so bad and so completely shambolic that we were unable to meet some very, very basic requirements and see the debts of honor were made. So this was not just a matter of, he got another couple of 5 or 6 people on a plane. That I don't think either of us would have any problems with. But it was the fact that he was making these requests at a moment when our basic functioning our basic functioning and our basic duties to the people to whom we had high obligations to protect and get out of that situation were not being adequately fulfilled. That's more than just a bad look. Sorry, that's worse. And I think that the second problem I have with all of this is a request from the defense minister. We're splitting hairs about what a request and an order might mean. Okay?
Oh, Jen, before you make that third point, let me add something to the second point.
Sure. Good. Go.
Sajjan's a former or retired, I think, Army officer. Actually, he might still be active in the reserves. I don't know how that works. But in any case, he's an experienced military officer and a reasonably high rank. He was a lieutenant colonel, if I recall correctly. This, in fact, was a key part of the minister's public branding. Do you remember when that photo of him in combat gear came out and he was immediately nicknamed, I think at the time, affectionately, Minister Badass, because it was a photo of him decked out in combat gear in Afghanistan.
Yep. He actually had experiences within the forces. That's admirable.
The minister has no excuse to be surprised by how any statement by a Minister of National Defense is interpreted by Canadian Armed Forces Command.
Okay. So noted, and moving on. My third point is that Sajjan's defense for this is essentially to accuse anybody who is suggesting that he acted inappropriately here of racism. In fact, I think his quote was something to the effect of, "I'm wondering if this would come up if I didn't have a turban on." It's like,
yeah, look, if in the middle of a scrambling military evacuation, National Defense Minister Gurney dispatched limited Canadian military resources to go grab a bunch of guys from like Norwich, England, and Northern Ireland who all had the same last name as either me or my mother's maiden name,
then I really do wonder whether or not we'd be asking this question if you weren't, a bald white dude sitting in the basement in Toronto. You know what I mean? I'm giving you a hard time. I'm sorry, Matt. But
life gives me a hard time. You might as well take a
It's fine. It's fine. No, I mean, I think that we're about done with trying to deflect from personal responsibility from ministers and people who are in elected office by playing the racism card. I think we're about done with that. I don't think that, maybe that would have flown in 2020. It's 2024 now, and we've now had the Prime Minister himself try and pull the racism card to get out of credible allegations of foreign interference in relation to the Han Dong affair. And I think that that was the jump the shark moment for that one. So, no, I do not think that people are picking on our former defense minister out of racism. I think that they're criticizing the former defense minister for inappropriately making inappropriate requests in the midst of a shambolic mess of an evacuation mission out of Afghanistan. That's what I think is happening here. And I think he deserves some additional scrutiny and questioning as a result of those decisions. Do I have faith that the current government apparatus is going to subject him to appropriate degrees of scrutiny and questioning as a result of that decision? Frankly, I don't. So moving on.
There's so much pearl clutching, and I've made a point of this in columns. And I obviously put cabinet ministers and the prime minister on a higher plane of responsibility and accountability because they're the ones with actual executive power. But I've made the point before that both the Liberals and the Conservatives, probably the others, but who pays attention to them, they're weaponizing identity as a shield. And, I remember, how many times, do you remember, and it's kind of a bit of a blast from the past now because her candidacy ended up flaming out, but do you remember, Sabrina Mado was criticized for some of the things she'd written as a columnist before she was briefly a Conservative candidate. And, okay, fair criticism, not fair criticism, I don't care, we can talk about that, but the response of Conservatives was the Liberals are attacking a powerful woman. And then you've already mentioned Han Dong. I don't even know if it was Dong specifically. It might have been. I'm trying to remember the timeline here, but it was at that first critical press conference over a year ago when foreign interference from China was being discussed, and the Prime Minister lectured us on anti-Asian racism. you're right. I've seen this before, and I've seen it from both major parties. They are all attempting to use their identity, whatever it happens to be,
as deflection shields,
deflector
and
shield.
and
Tricky here.
deflector shield. I apologize. I mean, like, I don't have a problem with a credible sort of examination of racism into media affairs or media criticism or any of these sorts of things. But when I've seen a government now routinely use allegations of racism against the media in order to deflect from credible allegations of wrongdoing, that tool stops working real fast for me. So I don't give any government at this point using those types of allegations the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think ordinary Canadians should either. And I think that the fact that he's making that kind of a claim, Mr. Sajjan is making that kind of a claim, undermines his credibility, and it undermines his his standing in my eyes for him to do something like that in the case of this. So when you were speaking there, I don't know if you noticed this, but I was typing something because there's something that also came through the feed today from the Toronto Star, a great headline. Some liberal insiders wonder if the party's gone too woke.
Oh, I didn't read that, but I saw it.
You think?
It's an interesting question because I still... Okay, you know what? I'm going to respond to that in 30 seconds. Let me make my final point on Sajjan first, which is just to say the minister who cried wolf. You know, I remember when the Liberals were hammering Trudeau over things she had said, fairly or not, again, we can debate that, and the Conservatives went for the deflector shield of she's a powerful woman and she's being attacked. We've seen it with MPs who are Jewish, MPs who are Muslim, MPs who are gay. Anything... You know, we were talking a few minutes ago about Chrystia Freeland, right? Like, I say she has no political skills and I'm attacked as misogynist. This is something that is ubiquitous across our politics and it's gross. But what it makes me think of, because the thing that pisses me off is that there is misogyny in our politics. There is Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and homophobia and racism. But it's all boy who cried wolf.
Well, and also I look at, for example, like ministers like Catherine McKenna, who when she was in politics did have to deal with an absurd amount of misogynistic nonsense when she was online. That was legit. That wasn't her trying to deflect from her responsibility because, you know, people were mean. And, there was gross stuff that was happening there. And I do think, for example, even like Justin Trudeau has to deal with stuff that is there's legitimate criticism and there's stuff that is wildly unhinged. So like the unhinged stuff's absolutely out there. No one's disputing that. But I find it inappropriate to try and essentially what it is, it's an attempt to try and use shame, intersectional power politics and guilt to shut down legitimate queries and legitimate debate and questions. And that's all that's happening here. And I don't think that we are under any obligation to take that seriously as a claim on his part or a defense on his part.
Thinking about that Colby Kosh column I reference fairly regularly where he called everything like 7 or 8 years ago, where he was just like, there's going to be a backlash from the right and all the people who've been yelled at for being racist are eventually going to shrug and go, fuck it, fine, I'm racist then. And like the words will just lose their meaning and we'll start losing the ability to govern conduct, because when everyone's a fascist, nothing's fascist. When everyone's a racist, nothing's racist. And it's not good. But anyway, to your point about too woke,
anyway,
I don't know. I hate woke. I hate the term.
I know. What does woke even mean? I mean, look, I don't want to get into the woke discourse because I think that's a whole other conversation that we don't have time for today. But no, I mean, I do think there's a legitimate question to be saying. So what do you mean by woke? Because I think that there are some people who think woke are just like, hey, I believe in equality between sexes. I believe in basic feminism. I believe in equality of rights between races. Like for some people, it just means that. And for other people, it has a very specific meaning. It's like you're talking about
assault on Western traditions and values.
No, or for some people, you're talking about a particularly narrow form of leftist discourse that is highly illiberal in its tactics and its power politics. So, like, I don't think there's a clear understanding what we mean by woke. Clearly, we're talking about something. I think Freddie DeBoer, has actually done the best sort of takedown on this. Is like, Of course, there is a specific movement that has become highly illiberal within the leftist stream of politics, and that's what generally we're talking about when we're talking about woke, right? But yeah, I mean, do you think you've maybe lost? Matt, do you think that the Liberals have generally lost touch with where most Canadians are and what their priorities are at? No shit, Sherlock. Welcome to the party. Like, you're 20 points down in the polls for a year. How else do you explain that?
What I think, Jen, and we'll drop the like and subscribe in a minute, and we will. What I think it is in the context of the Liberals, it was somewhere around 2019, a party that was balanced between political comms and messaging, but also the ability to get shit done, lost the ability to get shit done and put it all in on comms and messaging. So when I think the Liberals are described as woke, I read that as meaning a specific criticism, that they're focused on political signaling, not on political results. And the signaling might not be conventionally woke stuff. It might be dental care. But it's all about the signal. As one friend of mine used to put it, it's the sizzle, not the steak.
Well, and this goes back to what we were saying. It's all about the federal government is here for your feelings, right? And not here to actually get measurable things accomplished. But anyway, on that note, I do think we should say like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Well, honestly, Jen, I mean, a lot of federal politics on the pod today. The by-election result, cabinet ministers behaving badly. I just want to take 2 minutes. I want everyone to go enjoy their long weekend, but I want to take 2 minutes and encourage people to read my column today, which is an endorsement of yours. A couple of weeks ago, you wrote that you think Canadians are leaving. I don't know if they're leaving, but I do think they're getting their money out. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm just having in these anecdotal conversations, a lot of them, and yeah, anecdotes aren't data, blah, 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 but I'm getting punched in the face by reality lately where people I know who have wealth and means and mobility, they're not leaving Canada, but they're buying houses or condos elsewhere. They're establishing banking accounts elsewhere. They're establishing corporations elsewhere, and their wealth is flowing out. I don't think people are leaving Canada because Canada is still a great place to be, but I think they're making plan Bs. Mm-hmm. And I think Canada, especially for a wealthy, talented segment of the population, could turn into, I described in the column as a cottage or a ski lodge or a country club. It's where you hang out and relax because you're comfortable there, but it's not where you do your real life. You do your medical at a private hospital somewhere. You do your business in a Delaware registered corporation or something in the Caribbean. I had this great experience. People should read the column of seeing a gigantic pothole in a road that no one had fixed, but someone had dropped a pylon into. And then the pylon went away and the road never got fixed. And that was such a metaphor to me because I was planning on writing that column anyway. So I hope the readers check it out. Thanks for tuning in. Jen, I wish you a very happy long weekend. Remember, no written dispatch this weekend. Lighter publication schedule going forward. But Jen, I hope the water comes back on for you soon.
So do I. Just a really quick correction before I let you go, Matt, and that is last week I was talking about the ascension of Naheed Nenshi in Calgary of the Alberta the Alberta NDP party. Freudian slip. I said Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse, who I praised to high heaven because I thought she was awesome. Said she wasn't an MP. I was wrong. I don't know how I got it through my head that she was. She is an MP, so I'm sorry, Jody. I apologize. I screwed up.
Federally or provincially?
Provincially. She's
okay.
No, not an MP. An MLA. Sorry. See, I'm screwing up again. There we go. So clearly we're at the end. So sorry about that. I screwed up. And there's another quick note that I was correctly corrected on is that the NDP was out fundraising the UCP up until fairly recently with the ascension of Daniel Smith, and they've kind of reversed that trend. We'll see what happens under Nenshi. So anyway, those are the two little quick things I wanted to correct myself on, but apologies for those, and thanks again for listening very much. Like and subscribe the line. You know we adore you.
She's an astronaut. The MLA, I mean. Happy long weekend, everybody. We will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Now is the time to modernize Canadian laws so that adult smokers have information and access to better alternatives. By doing so, we can create lasting change. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.